My trip didn't start the way I had hoped. I was supposed to be flying out to a conference in Minneapolis that Thursday and Friday. Normally, my wife, Rachel, would take a half day just to see me off and make the departure feel special. This time, though, all I got was a quick kiss goodbye before she rushed off to work. Let me back up a little. My name's Ethan, though some people still call me Nate, an old nickname that stuck from college. I'm 49 years old, and Rachel and I have been married for 24 years. We've got 2 kids, Ryan, who's 22, and Lily, who just turned 20. I left work around 3 o'clock that afternoon and headed to the airport, like I always do, early to avoid any last-minute stress. My flight was scheduled for 6 p.m., and everything seemed to be running smoothly, at first. But then the weather decided to turn on us. A snowstorm was moving in, and the flight out of Minnesota got delayed. After about a 45-minute wait, they finally let us board. We were in the air maybe half an hour when I felt the plane subtly veer left. At first, I thought it was a routine adjustment, but then I realized we were turning around. The pilot came over the intercom to confirm it. Minneapolis was a no-go. The storm was too intense. We had to head back to Chicago. Once we landed, I made a beeline for the airline's check-in desk to rebook for the next morning. I was lucky to snag one of the last seats available. I might have missed the first day of the conference, but I was still determined to make it there. I called my contact in Minneapolis to explain the delay and left a detailed message for my boss. Then, hoping to find some comfort, I called home. That's when things took a strange turn. Rachel didn't answer. The house was dark. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I left my luggage in the car and walked inside, feeling a little uneasy. I heard voices coming from the living room, which caught me off guard, until I realized it was just the TV left on. Thing is, I knew I had turned it off before I left. That meant Rachel had come home after work. But now she was gone again. No note, no message, nothing. I shut off the TV and called her cell. She finally picked up, sounding sweet and casual, asking where I was, as if nothing was unusual. She told me she was home, just watching some TV shows. Said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. But I was standing in our living room. She wasn't here. That's when the exhaustion from the day hit me hard, along with something else. A knot of confusion and doubt that I couldn't shake. I had come home hoping for warmth, for Rachel's arms around me, a quiet night in our bed. But that hope vanished in seconds, replaced by something cold and unfamiliar. I didn't expect to be hit with lies. Deception. For a moment I was just blank. Staring at nothing, unsure of what I was even feeling. Had she really lied to me? Was she cheating? Why? It didn't make sense. There was no logical explanation. Whether she was out with friends or meeting someone, it didn't add up. I guess I went quiet too long, because Rachel's voice cut through the line, worried now. Ethan? Are you still there? Snapping out of it, I muttered. Yeah? Sorry. We landed back at O'Hare. I've gotta go. I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang again almost immediately, but I silenced it. I needed a minute alone. I sat on the couch, numb, my thoughts swirling. What was going on? Why would Rachel lie to me? Then, out of nowhere, I remembered something. 4 years ago, for our 20th anniversary, I had pulled off an elaborate surprise for her, a 2-week cruise. I'd lied my way through that entire plan, even looping in her boss and parents. All harmless in the end, but still, lies dressed up as love. Could that be what this was? Some kind of surprise? I clung to that thought like a lifeline, even though something deep inside me was already whispering that this was different. Desperate for clarity, I thought of someone who might know the truth, my daughter Lily. She was close to Rachel. If anyone knew what was really going on, it would be her. I dialed her number from memory. My heart ached for comfort. And then, there she was. Lily's voice, soft and familiar, picked up on the other end. Hey Dad, how are you? I asked Lily how she was doing, just a simple check-in, but my voice carried more weight than usual. She told me she just finished up some homework and was unwinding with a little TV. I hesitated, then gently asked if she'd spoken to her mom recently. Specifically, if Rachel had mentioned anything unusual. Lily said they'd had their regular Sunday night call. That gave me a small flicker of hope. So, I carefully asked if she might know anything about a surprise Rachel could be planning. I made it clear I didn't want to know what it was, just whether something was in the works. But Lily's answer crushed that hope in an instant. She said she didn't know anything about a surprise and then asked me if everything was okay. Trying to keep my voice casual, I told her that Rachel had just been acting a little off lately, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was planning something special. Maybe for my upcoming 50th birthday. Lily was quiet for a beat before pointing out that we'd already celebrated my birthday last month. That stung a little. I knew then I wasn't going to get any answers from her. I wished her a good night, and she said goodbye in a tone that was clearly disappointed, maybe even confused. Once I hung up, I was left with the harsh truth. Whatever was going on, it wasn't some elaborate surprise. So why had Rachel lied to me? My mind started spinning with possibilities. Maybe it had to do with her job. She'd been pushing hard for a promotion lately, staying late at work more often than not. That had to be it, right? Still, I couldn't figure out why she'd lie. If she was just working late, she could have told me. We always talked about stuff like that. She knew how much I wanted her to cut back on her hours so we could spend more time together. It wasn't an unreasonable request, and she had acknowledged that before. I remembered a decision I made not long before our 20th anniversary. I'd been offered the role of vice president of finance at my company, a huge step up. But it came with a catch. I'd have to travel constantly, flying to Chicago for board meetings, visiting factories all over the country. At first, I was thrilled. It felt like the next big thing in my career. But Rachel wasn't so sure. She reminded me of a coworker who'd taken a similar position and ended up divorced just 2 years later. He had money, sure, but he also had an empty house. We talked about it for days, what it would mean for us, for the kids. Back then, Ryan and Lily were still in high school. They needed their dad around. Rachel didn't want to raise them alone. It became clear that if I took that job, I might lose the very thing I was working to provide for, my family. So I turned it down. I said no to the promotion. And I've never regretted it, not once. But now, watching Rachel chase her own promotion, I found myself wondering if the same thing was happening in reverse. Our kids were both in college now. It was just the two of us. Rachel thought her new position wouldn't change much, just a few more business trips here and there. But for me, it felt like we were drifting. I barely saw her during the week. An hour here, maybe 2. That wasn't enough. We used to spend real time together. Talk, laugh, just be close. Lately, even our weekends had disappeared into her work. She started going in on Saturdays, sometimes even Sundays. And when she got home, she was too drained to talk, let alone connect. I couldn't even remember the last time we were truly intimate. 3 weeks ago? A month? Longer? Everything had blurred into a sad kind of fog. Maybe Rachel lied on that phone call because she didn't want to deal with my concerns. Maybe it was easier to pretend she was home, watching TV, rather than admit she was still at the office. Or worse, somewhere else entirely. Still, I had to be fair. I was the one on a work trip this time. I put in long hours too. But there was one way to get the truth. I decided to call her direct line at T-Bold, the advertising agency where she worked. The phone rang. Then someone picked up. It wasn't Rachel. It was a man. A voice I didn't recognize at first. "Turnbull speaking," he said. "Jake Turnbull." And in that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly tried to steady myself. I'd expected Rachel to answer the phone, not some guy. So when this man picked up, I did what came naturally and introduced myself using my nickname. "Nate." What he said next made my stomach twist. "Hey, aren't you supposed to be on vacation with Rachel?" he asked casually. That one sentence hit me like a punch. Vacation? What vacation? I felt frozen, confused. There was clearly something going on here that I wasn't part of. Swallowing my shock, I forced a chuckle and apologized, saying I must have dialed the wrong number by accident. Jake didn't seem to think anything was weird. He laughed it off and told me Rachel owed him lunch for covering her shift and all her late hours lately. It's already 9 p.m., he added, clearly frustrated, and I'm still here. Then he ended the call. I just sat there, stunned. It slowly started sinking in. Rachel wasn't at work. She wasn't even supposed to be at work. According to Jake, she was on vacation through the end of the week. Panic crept in, one icy inch at a time. My thoughts spiraled out of control. Where was she? What was she doing? Why would she lie? And then, an uninvited thought whispered through the back of my mind. No. It couldn't be. I've always tried to see the best in people. I'm the type who believes most folks are decent, who gives the benefit of the doubt even when it's hard. But now, against every part of who I thought I was, I started to imagine the worst. Could she really be cheating on me? I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Then, of all things, my mind went to her sister, Vanessa. We'd drifted apart from Vanessa and her ex-husband, Mike, over the past few years. But there was a time when the four of us were inseparable. We shared everything: meals, vacations, holidays. Our lives felt woven together. Until that one day everything changed. I'd come home early with a splitting headache and took a couple Tylenol before crashing on the couch. I must have dozed off, because I didn't even hear the front door open. Rachel and Vanessa came in from a shopping trip, talking and laughing, completely unaware I was there. And then, I heard it. Vanessa, chatting like it was no big deal, asked Rachel if she noticed the new product manager at the grocery store. Rachel responded with a little laugh, saying he was cute. She mentioned he had smiled at her. Then Vanessa added something that made my stomach lurch. Well, it'd be better if he smiled after what happened yesterday, in the back seat of my car. She said it like it was a joke. Rachel's tone changed instantly. She told Vanessa to be careful, that she could get caught, that she could lose a good man. But Vanessa just shrugged it off. I always cover my tracks, she said. Then they walked out of the room, still laughing, leaving me frozen on the couch, alone with what I just heard. I was shaken. Morally and emotionally, I didn't know what to do. I've always held honesty as a sacred thing. I couldn't ignore what I'd overheard, but at the same time, blowing up Vanessa's marriage felt like lighting a match in a room soaked in gasoline. If I told Mike, it would destroy everything. Before I could decide, Rachel and the kids got home. I watched her closely that evening, trying to convince myself that since she didn't approve of what Vanessa had done, maybe it meant something. Maybe she was still someone I could trust. That night, as we got ready for bed, I brought it up. Carefully. I told her what I'd overheard, leaving out some details, and asked her what she thought someone should do if they found out about a friend cheating. Was confronting them the right thing? Rachel looked uncertain at first. She took a breath, then said it really depended on the situation. There were a lot of things to consider. I pressed her a little further, trying to feel out where she stood. I asked, Okay, but what if it were Mike? What if he had picked up some woman at a bar and cheated on Vanessa? Should we just look the other way? The air between us felt heavy. Something about the way she hesitated before answering left a sour taste in my mouth. I was still weighing the right thing to do when Rachel suddenly sat up in bed, clutching her phone tightly, visibly shaken. Her face was flushed with anger, and her voice trembled as she said she was going to call Vanessa and confront her. I gently reached over and took the phone from her hands. Let me handle this, I said softly. This isn't just about them, it's about what I overheard. I need to be the one to tell Mike. Rachel looked unsure, clearly torn about whether we were doing the right thing. Are you sure? She asked. I nodded, trying to project more confidence than I felt. Yeah. He deserves to know. And I hope to God he kicks that bastard out. Her eyes locked onto mine, full of conviction. "Well, he's not staying with us," she said firm. "Let him find somewhere else to sleep. I'm not sheltering a cheater in this house." She didn't have to convince me. I was lucky. Mike picked up after a couple rings. "Hey, it's your favorite son-in-law," I said, trying to ease into the conversation. He chuckled. "You mean my only son-in-law? Automatically makes you the favorite." Then his tone shifted. "What's going on? Kind of late for a call." I exhaled slowly. "Mike, man. I wish I didn't have to say this. I overheard something today. It's bad. And I wouldn't be calling if I wasn't sure." There was silence on the line. I continued carefully. "Vanessa's been unfaithful. It happened just yesterday." The pause that followed was heavy. When Mike finally spoke, his voice was low and stunned. "Are you absolutely sure this is about my Vanessa?" "I heard it straight from her," I said. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't ashamed. She was bragging. He didn't say much after that. Just a quiet, broken, "Thanks." Rachel looked over at me, her eyes filled with tears. She reached for me and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I wrapped my arms around her, and we held each other in silence, trying to find some peace in the middle of the storm we just unleashed. After a long, quiet moment, I asked her if maybe they, Vanessa and Mike, should consider therapy. It seemed like a natural next step. Rachel sighed, her voice sleepy and heavy. "Maybe," she murmured. "But once someone cheats, they usually do it again." I nodded silently. Deep down, I agreed. I don't know when we fell asleep, but sometime in the middle of the night, the phone rang again. I grabbed it quickly, trying not to wake Rachel. I recognized the voice instantly. It was Vanessa. And she was furious. She didn't even let me speak at first. "What the hell did you tell Mike?" I kept my tone calm. "I told him the truth." Rachel stirred beside me, watching closely as I handled the call. Vanessa's voice cracked with disbelief. "You told him? My sister? How could you?" "Sometimes the truth comes out whether you like it or not," I said. "And cheaters should deal with the consequences." There was a pause, then I heard her crying. "He kicked me out," she sobbed. I didn't flinch. "That's what happens when you lie and betray someone like that." Through tears, she begged, "Please, can I come stay with you guys? Just for a bit?" I looked to Rachel, who sat up slowly and shook her head. Her face was stone. I put my hand over the receiver. "What should I tell her?" Rachel didn't hesitate. She leaned toward the phone and said loud enough for Vanessa to hear, "Tell her to stay away. We don't take cheaters into our home." I turned back to the phone. "Vanessa, you're not welcome here. You made your choices. You're not a part of our lives anymore. Please don't call us again." She didn't answer. She just hung up. Rachel pressed herself close to me. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I mean it. I'm proud of you." For the first time that night, we both found a bit of calm. We held each other and fell asleep, emotionally drained but united. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, the storm really hit. Rachel's father called, and he was livid. He tore into her, shouting on the phone, blaming her for what had happened. Rachel hung up in tears, her hands trembling. I sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "This wasn't just your decision," I reminded her. "We talked about it. We agreed. And we did what we thought was right." She nodded, but I could tell the guilt was eating at her. "It wasn't about punishing her," I said gently. "It was about protecting ourselves, from lies, from people who think trust is disposable." Rachel sniffled and wiped her eyes. "I know. I just didn't think it would all fall apart this fast." Neither did I. But once the truth is out, there's no putting it back. The thing is, I had only brought up a hypothetical scenario about Mike cheating. I never actually said he had cheated on Vanessa. I was just trying to understand Rachel's mindset. I asked her straight out, how is what Mike might have done any different from what Vanessa actually did? Rachel got defensive fast. "Vanessa's my sister," she said. I frowned. "So that makes it okay to cheat on your spouse? Because you're related to the cheater?" She didn't have an answer to that. For a few seconds she just stared at me, silent. 3 years ago, I made my position very clear. I didn't want Vanessa anywhere near our kids or in our home. Rachel knew how I felt. And even though she agreed at the time, I found out later she was still seeing her sister behind my back. She'd visit Vanessa while I was out of town for work, keeping it all under the radar. Eventually, Mike managed to move on. He even started planning to remarry. My own anger toward Vanessa faded. I didn't think about her much anymore, and honestly, I enjoyed the peace her absence brought into our lives. But now, something about Rachel's evasiveness, her lies, her strange behavior, it brought all that resentment flooding back. That night, I tried to bring things back around. I needed closure. I suspected that Rachel might be feeling guilty, not just about lying, but about everything else she wasn't telling me. At that point, I didn't even know if I wanted an explanation. I just wanted clarity. What happened next was unexpected. I dreamt I was standing on stage at the conference I was supposed to be attending, talking in front of hundreds of people. I was in the middle of a speech, explaining the two kinds of people in life, those who deny reality, and those who confront it head-on. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel's boss, Dave Millant, raised his hand and blurted out that he had been dodging my wife. Jake Turnbull, seated behind him, chimed in too. He admitted the same thing. Another man even threw in a smug comment that got a few laughs from the crowd. I sat up with a jolt, drool on my chin, heart pounding. It was just a dream. But it was midnight now, and I'd been asleep on the couch for over an hour. Disoriented, I glanced around. Maybe Rachel had come home while I was out cold? I rushed to the bedroom, but it was empty. No sign of her. Then it hit me. She was probably with Vanessa. I debated whether to call her sister. But reaching out to Vanessa would mean going behind Rachel's back, just like she'd done to me. I hesitated. Then I remembered something. A year ago, after losing my phone on a business trip from New York to Cincinnati, I'd installed a tracking app, Find My Phone, on both of our devices. Without wasting another second, I opened the app. And there it was. Rachel's location lit up on the screen. Mills Lake. That threw me. Mills Lake? What would she be doing there? That wasn't the kind of place someone like Vanessa could afford to visit, especially with the financial troubles she'd been having. Mills Lake was an upscale lakeside community, lined with million-dollar cottages and luxury estates. Way out of our league. I zoomed in on her GPS marker using Google Earth. Rachel's phone was pinging from inside a massive gated estate, surrounded by a tall stone wall. What the hell was she doing in a place like that? It was an hour's drive away, but I didn't even think twice. I had to know. At the same time, I knew confronting her directly wouldn't get me the truth. She'd lie. Dodge. Deflect. I needed proof, undeniable, concrete proof, before I said a single word. So I grabbed my keys and headed for Mills Lake. As I drove, waves of guilt and regret surged through me. I should have done this earlier. I should have checked her location the second she lied on that call. Instead, I let myself get pulled along by excuses. By hope. Now, I was done hoping. I was driving into the dark, chasing a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to hear, carried forward by the anxious, burning need to find out what Rachel had been hiding. I finally reached the estate where Rachel's phone had been pinging, but every step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the dread of what I might find. Up ahead, a massive iron gate stood like a warning. There was no way I was going to drive right up to the house, knock on the door, and start calling for my wife. Not in a place like this. If I parked near the front, I'd probably have security, or worse, the police, on me in minutes. This was an exclusive community. Outsiders weren't welcome. So I drove on for a bit until I spotted a narrow, almost hidden path leading toward the woods. I pulled over, parked the car, and stepped out into the night. The real problem was the stone wall surrounding the property. It was high and solid, blocking any chance of getting in from the road. But then I remembered, this place backed up to Mills Lake. Maybe I could find another way in from the water side. With new determination, I made my way through the trees toward the shoreline. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath visible in the cold night air. Eventually, I found a narrow footpath that snaked its way toward the water. I followed it carefully until the trees opened up and I saw it, a grand mansion sitting just beyond the tree line. The kind of house with massive bay windows and lights glowing on the second floor. I pulled out my phone again to check Rachel's GPS location. It matched up. This was the place. The ground floor was mostly dark, except for one window where the curtain hadn't been fully drawn. A soft, golden light spilled out onto the lawn. I needed a better view. Looking around, I spotted a tree with thick, sturdy branches. I climbed up, branch by branch, until I was high enough to see into the lit window. Inside, a man stood in a white terrycloth robe, walking across the room. I didn't recognize him. He looked older than me, probably in his late 50s, and then he vanished from view. Seconds later, a woman stepped into the light. It was Vanessa. She stood there in an open robe, sipping champagne. And I'll be honest, she still looked good for her age. I couldn't pretend I didn't recognize her immediately. It was obvious now, Rachel was here. With her. I should have felt vindicated, like I'd solved the mystery. But instead, my stomach churned. This wasn't just about Rachel visiting her sister. There was something more going on here. Then, just as I was starting to piece it together, the older man reappeared. He walked over to Vanessa, touched her, then slid her glass out of her hand and set it aside. His hands didn't hesitate. I had to look away. I climbed down a little, feeling sick. I'd never been some prude, but what I'd just seen didn't feel like love, it felt transactional. Empty. Physical. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Vanessa, even though I'd never held her in high regard. If that's the kind of life she wanted, I wanted no part of it for Rachel. I was just about to climb down fully when something froze me in place. In the background, on a couch farther back in the room, Rachel was sitting there. Laughing. Her robe was open. She looked drunk, detached, like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she wasn't someone's wife. Like she wasn't my wife. She hadn't seen me, until suddenly she did. Our eyes met. I didn't even breathe. And then I panicked. I stepped back, lost my balance, and tumbled from the tree. Branches broke my fall, and somehow, by some miracle, I only ended up with scrapes and bruises. But it felt like my body had aged a decade in the few seconds it took to hit the ground. Everything hurt, but nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I stood up slowly, dazed, wandering aimlessly through the woods like a ghost. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to collapse and never get up. I didn't even feel the cold anymore. My legs carried me back to the car, but my mind stayed behind. With her. With the version of Rachel I thought I knew. It wasn't the fall from the tree that broke me. It was seeing her. Like that. I sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel, barely able to process what had just happened. A dozen thoughts raced through my head. Should I have stormed inside? Confronted her? Called the police? I even considered kicking in the door and demanding answers. But that would have only made things worse. I'd be the one in handcuffs before sunrise. So I sat there, alone in the dark, gripped by a storm of grief and fury. There was no denying it anymore. Rachel had betrayed me. And no dream, no excuse, no hope could protect me from that truth now. I knew I couldn't let my anger take over. Letting it consume me would only make things worse, for me, for Rachel, for everyone. No matter how betrayed I felt, deep down I knew I'd never lay a hand on her. That wasn't who I was. Still, as I drove away from that house at Mills Lake, my mind churned with possibilities. The easiest route? Go home, pack my things, and leave. We lived in a no-fault divorce state. We had separate incomes. The kids were grown. There wouldn't be a messy custody battle. We'd split the assets and go our separate ways. Simple. Clean. But something inside me wanted more than that. Not revenge, exactly, but justice. A moment of reckoning. That's when the idea hit me. And I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and called Rachel, knowing she likely wouldn't answer. That's what I was counting on. I wanted to leave a message, one she'd hear in real time, one that would rattle her. I made my voice sound tired but calm. "Hey, sweetheart," I began, knowing the voicemail would pick it up. "Just wanted to give you a heads up not to freak out if you hear my keys in the door in a few minutes." I spun a quick story, something believable. I explained that my flight had been delayed because of the snowstorm. That we'd been rerouted to Chicago. That the airline didn't know the exact landing time, but I should be home in about 30 minutes. Then I ended the call. I pictured her sitting on that expensive couch, glassy-eyed and half-drunk, hearing that message and realizing just how tangled in her lies she really was. If she bought the story, panic would be setting in. She'd be scrambling, trying to get ahead of me, throwing on clothes, whispering frantic excuses to Vanessa and the guy whose name I still didn't know. I hoped she was just drunk enough not to question how I'd left a voicemail mid-flight. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. It was Rachel calling back. I answered, keeping my voice weary and low, like someone who'd just endured a long travel day. "Sorry if I woke you," I muttered. She sounded rushed but tried to sound normal. "No, it's fine. I'm actually heading home now. Should be there in about an hour or so." I acknowledged her calmly. "Okay." She hung up quickly. Moments later, I saw her car shooting out of the estate gate like a bullet. She was flying down the road, tires nearly veering off into a ditch. My heart thumped hard. She was drunk, way more than I had thought. Even through the bitterness, I couldn't ignore the danger. She wasn't just putting herself at risk, she was endangering everyone else on the road. And like it or not, she was still the mother of my kids. I couldn't let her crash. So I picked up my phone again and dialed emergency services. When the operator answered, I kept my voice steady. "I need to report a possible drunk driver," I said. "They nearly collided with my car and they're swerving all over the road." I gave them everything: the make and model, a dark blue Ford Taurus, the location near Mills Lake, and the last 4 digits of the license plate, which I'd memorized. "She's heading southbound," I added. "You need to stop her before someone gets hurt." The operator thanked me and told me a patrol unit was being dispatched immediately. I stayed behind her, far enough not to raise suspicion but close enough to watch. 2 exits later, I was still following, heart racing, eyes glued to her taillights, waiting to see what would happen next. Up ahead, I spotted flashing red and blue lights. A patrol car had pulled onto the bridge just as Rachel's car approached. From my angle, I saw it come to life, accelerating, lights flashing in the dark, signaling her to pull over. I drove past them slowly, my chest tightening. There was a strange sense of relief, but also an overwhelming wave of grief. 45 minutes later, I was home, if you could still call it that. The silence inside was suffocating. It felt almost cruel. In just one night, the woman I had built my life around, the person I'd loved more than anything, had unraveled it all with a chain of careless, tragic choices. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened. About how close she came to crashing. How close my kids came to losing their mother. That thought hit me hard. The emotional weight pressed down on my chest as I sat on the edge of the bed. The worst part wasn't that I didn't love her anymore, it's that I did. Or at least I had, with every piece of my heart. But now, I couldn't see a future with her. I couldn't imagine rebuilding this wreckage. I turned off the house phone. Silenced my cell. I needed space, real space, to think, to breathe, to even begin to make sense of it all. I poured myself a glass of wine. Then another. For years, I believed that love matured like a fine vintage, getting richer, more complex, more powerful with time. But tonight, that belief tasted sour. The love I thought we had, it felt like it had curdled into something sharp and bitter. I stared into the glass, thinking about what came next. I was adrift. The betrayal had gutted me, sure, but what really hurt, what hollowed me out, was the realization that our love had simply died. This was a love that had defined nearly every part of my adult life. 26 years of history, 24 of them as husband and wife. Without her, who was I? The weight of that question almost broke me. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, I thought about ending it. Just disappearing beneath the dark waters under a bridge somewhere. Not because I wanted to die, but because I didn't know how to live without her. Starting over seemed impossible. I couldn't picture a version of life where I made decisions without her, where I wasn't thinking about her needs, her happiness. Even my smallest routines, what to eat, what to watch, what to say, were shaped by Rachel. Family had always been my compass. Every big decision I made, every sacrifice, was to protect and support them. Even my social life had revolved around what was best for us. I wasn't someone who stayed out late with coworkers or craved office gossip. If I went to a company event, I left as soon as I could. I just wanted to be home. And now? Now I was in that home alone. Not just without Rachel, but without anyone. Loneliness wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a presence. Cold and heavy, like someone had draped it over my shoulders and nailed it in place. I kept asking myself, why? Why did she choose this? Why cheat, why lie, when she could have just ended things honestly? It would have hurt, yeah. But at least it would have been respectful. At least it would have honored the life we'd built. When did she stop loving me? Had she been waiting, just going through the motions, until the kids were out of the house? When our son left for college, I thought, this is our time now. I was ready to focus on us again. But maybe, for her, that was the end. Maybe she had already decided we were done, and I just hadn't seen it. And then there was him. I didn't even know his name, but I knew his presence. The comfort between them. The way she smiled in his company. He wasn't just a fling. He was her escape. She and her lover had quietly shut the door on our life while I was still clinging to it, leaving me standing on the outside. But in the middle of all that darkness, something stopped me from slipping deeper. My kids. Thinking of them, Ross and Emily, was like a flare in the night. Their faces, their laughter, their futures. Even if Rachel had betrayed me, they were still part of everything that mattered. My love for them hadn't changed. And in that moment, it saved me. Even as my self-worth hit rock bottom, that love gave me a reason to stay standing. To face whatever came next. I didn't have the strength to lift myself out of the pit I'd fallen into. I was drowning in despair. But thinking about Ross and Emily, they were the only thing that kept me tethered to reality. Just imagining their futures gave me a flicker of something like self-preservation. Soon they'd both be starting their own lives, maybe even their own families. I couldn't be the broken man they had to fix. I needed to shield myself before the next wave of grief crushed me. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell. But I knew I had to pull away, from Rachel, from all of it. I'd carry her with me always. The memories. The love. But now, those memories were tainted by the image of her with another man. It was unbearable. I had to get out. All my life, I'd been content with the basics. I didn't need wealth or luxury. I was raised by parents who didn't have much but gave me everything that mattered: love, honesty, kindness. All this material crap around me now? None of it meant anything anymore. I took stock of what I truly needed: some clothes, my car, and my laptop. That was it. The decision came suddenly, but it felt right. I was going to leave. No dramatic goodbye. No confrontation. Just disappear. Rachel wouldn't see me again. I couldn't even look at her, not without feeling that crushing sense of loss all over again. I got up, heart pounding, and started packing. It only took about half an hour to load up the car. The clock was just shy of 6 a.m. when I zipped the last duffel bag shut. Exhausted, I let myself lie down for a short nap. I figured Rachel would still be sobering up at the detox center until later that morning. For now, I had time to rest. At 9 a.m., my alarm jolted me awake. No hesitation, I grabbed my phone and booked an emergency appointment with a divorce lawyer. Then I stepped into the shower, letting the water wash over me like I could rinse off the past. I took off my wedding ring and placed it carefully on the table beside the phone. That moment hit me harder than I expected. This was real now. I was leaving behind not just a marriage, but a life. A future I once thought was unshakable. I sat down and wrote her a letter. Not because I expected a conversation, there was nothing left to say, but because I needed to say something. I needed to close this chapter with clarity and honesty. Rachel, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, completely removed from your life. Our paths won't cross again. It devastates me to write this, but I can't ignore what I've seen. The betrayal is too deep, the pain too sharp to keep living as if nothing happened. I look at you now, and I see someone who's slipping into the same reckless loneliness I saw in Vanessa. Maybe it's a family curse, or maybe it's just who you are now. I don't know. But I can't go down with you. Still, I'm grateful for the life we once had. For the 24 years we shared. For our beautiful children. I'm not going to drag this out. I hope you're quick to return to the arms of your lover, the wealthy one, in that mansion at Mills Lake. Maybe that's the kind of justice life has handed me. But I want no part in it. There's nothing left for us to discuss. My lawyer will be in touch. Please sign the divorce papers without delay. Evan. At 10 a.m., I was at the bank, taking care of everything that needed to be done. I paid off the shared credit card debt, closed our joint accounts, and transferred the necessary funds to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next 2 months, trying to leave without chaos. I pulled my name off the joint account and walked out of there holding a check for $250,000, my half of the savings and investments we built over the years. By noon, I walked into the office. My boss looked up, surprised. After all, I was supposed to be in Minneapolis. I sat down with my boss and gave him the news. I was resigning immediately and relocating out of state. He looked stunned. We weren't just boss and employee, we had history. Years ago, I'd turned down a promotion that would have bumped me above him, and he hadn't taken it well at first. But 2 years ago, when he was going through a nasty divorce, I told him the truth. I'd stepped aside back then because I knew he needed the job more than I did at the time. From that moment on, our dynamic shifted. We weren't just colleagues, we were something closer to equals. Maybe even friends. He let out a long sigh and nodded. I get it, he said. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably do the same. Instead of sending me to HR and cutting a check for my 401k, he offered me something unexpected, a position in their new optics division in Tucson. The salary would be lower, but the cost of living was cheap enough that I could find a solid place without breaking the bank. We shook on it, and he promised to tell everyone I'd chosen to leave voluntarily, no drama. From there, I headed to my lawyer's office. I laid it all out, my decision to separate from Rachel, the betrayal, the finality of it all. I told him to serve the divorce papers and give Rachel power of attorney to sell the house, which was half our net worth. He tried to talk me through other possibilities, maybe out of concern or loyalty. But eventually, he saw how resolute I was. By midnight I would be gone, living in another state, in another life, without a wife. That afternoon, I was running on fumes. Exhausted, I found a rundown motel around 8 p.m. I used a disposable phone I'd bought earlier and called Ross. I told him it was my new number. He asked if I'd talked to Mom. That's when I broke the news. I found out yesterday she'd been unfaithful. There was a long pause. Then he said he was disappointed, and asked what I was going to do. I already did it, I told him. I packed my things, closed our accounts, left my job, and I'm heading south. She'll have the divorce papers by the end of the week. He asked if Emily knew yet. I told him she didn't, but I'd talk to her soon. I promised to keep in touch regularly, and told him how much I loved him. We hung up after exchanging a few more quiet, heartfelt words. Then I called Emily. That call hurt even more. She was heartbroken. She couldn't understand how her mother, who had watched Aunt Vanessa tear apart her own family, could inflict the same pain on us. Emily asked the question I'd been avoiding myself. How long has this been going on? When did we stop being enough for her? I swallowed hard and told her the truth. The reasons don't matter now, sweetie. What matters is that I trusted her with everything, and she broke that trust. But I'll be okay. I just need space. I promised her that once the school year ended, she could come visit me. I told her I'd send her my new address. My throat tightened as I added, there will always be a place for you with me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. When I got to Tucson, the optics division was small, just 30 people, but the district manager was warm, more like a kind older cousin than a stiff supervisor. That helped more than I expected. I felt welcome, like I wasn't just starting over. I was being given a chance to breathe again. A month later, I bought a cozy little home in a quiet condo development. Peaceful. Private. It was mine. I never reached out to Rachel. I let the lawyers handle everything, and when I needed updates, I got them through my kids. But things didn't stay quiet. One day, my lawyer called and told me Rachel wasn't signing. She wanted to fight it. She was threatening to contest the divorce and drag things out, even if it meant financial destruction for both of us. I took a deep breath and gave him my answer. Don't file it yet. I told my lawyer I didn't care anymore. I just wanted Rachel to have the chance to start over, rebuild her life, maybe even find peace. We'd had 24 good years together, and that still meant something, even if it had ended in betrayal. I asked him to let her know that I had no intention of rekindling anything between us. That I wished her well, and also, more colorfully, that she could go to hell. I even asked if he could deliver that last part for me. He chuckled, saying he'd be happy to, though he warned me, that'll cost you an extra $150. We laughed, and I told him it was worth every penny. Talking to the kids was harder. One by one, I had to make them understand that there was no going back. The first bump came when Emily told me, Dad, Mom totally freaked out when I mentioned staying with you this summer. I tried to reassure her. Promised I'd do my best to visit her and her grandparents. But her reaction was so intense, so upsetting, that I had to put my phone away for a few days just to breathe. Rachel didn't handle things any better when Ross told her he planned to split his summer between the two of us. I made the conscious choice not to ask how she was doing. I was focused on moving forward, no matter how hard it was, especially since part of me still missed her. Not her now, but the version of her I'd loved before all this. Over time, through my kids, I learned more about her condition. To my surprise, Rachel had sunk into a deep depression, much like the one I'd fallen into when this all started. It shocked me. Honestly, it felt absurd. She was the one who cheated. She was the one who shattered everything. And yet here she was, broken. But maybe it wasn't so surprising. Infidelity doesn't just destroy marriages, it eats away at the person who committed it, too. You cheat, and you hurt the people you're supposed to love. Then you keep living, pretending, while guilt rots you from the inside out. Even though I'd stepped away and given her space to move on without me, Rachel clung to the idea that there was still a chance. She resisted the divorce, refused to accept that she'd burned the bridge between us. For 2 years, she'd lived in denial. Even knowing our kids were in regular contact with me, she used them to send messages, little apologies, promises that she'd do anything to prove she still loved me. I knew Emily and Ross hoped we might reconcile. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. The physical distance between us didn't make it any easier on them. They were constantly having to choose Mom or Dad. It wasn't fair. Rachel started digging, pressing the kids for clues. All she knew was that I'd moved to a southern state. It took her nearly 3 years, but one day, she found me. I was leaving work when I spotted her across the street, hovering near the building. My heart sank. How the hell had she found me? I ducked out the side door, heart pounding, and called Louise right away to tell her what was happening. We'd had a plan for something like this. I made sure Rachel saw me getting into my car, then drove around for a bit, running a few pointless errands, looping through the city. Eventually, I headed back home. As I pulled into the driveway, Louise opened the door for me before I even reached for my keys. She was radiant, 30 years old, graceful, and warm, with our 1-year-old daughter resting on her hip. The doorbell rang. Louise answered it, holding the baby in one arm. I watched from the kitchen, seeing the confusion and disbelief wash over Rachel's face. Louise smiled, her Spanish accent gently curling her words. "Can I help you?" "I need to talk to Evan," Rachel said, her voice shaky. Louise turned her head and called to me. I took our daughter into my arms and walked to the doorway. Well, I said with a slow, ironic smile. I met her eyes without flinching, letting the weight of the moment hang there. I looked Rachel in the eyes and asked calmly but firmly, "What do you want after almost 3 years?" She stood there, barely able to speak, her voice cracked and low. "I just needed to apologize," she said. "I'm so sorry, Evan. For everything. For the pain I caused you. It wasn't your fault, it was mine. I was foolish." She told me she still loved me. That she always had. Said I'd been the best husband and father a woman could ask for, and she couldn't forgive herself for throwing that away. The regret on her face looked real. And I'll be honest, for a moment, her words hit something deep in me. But I also knew this couldn't turn into something more. I had to shut the door, figuratively and literally. "Well," I said, smiling politely, "it's okay. Water under the bridge, right? I've spent so long not thinking about it that I can honestly say, I forgive you." I looked down at little Marisol, beaming in my arms, and added, "I sincerely wish you a joyful life, Rachel. One filled with love. Just like the one I have now." Her tears spilled over. She tried to say something, but it came out in pieces. She stepped forward, gave me a quick hug, and walked out the door. As it clicked shut behind her, I leaned against it and let out a breath I had been holding for years. Louise came out of the kitchen, saw my face, and gently took Marisol from my arms. She held me tight and kissed my forehead. Then she said with warmth and determination, "I need to let Horacio know I'm heading home with our daughter. Tell him I'll be waiting for you at the barbecue on Saturday." I whispered. She grinned. "Absolutely, boss. See you tomorrow." Later that week, my lawyer let me know Rachel had signed the divorce papers. Officially, it was done. The healing didn't happen overnight. It took time. I built friendships, let myself explore intimacy again. Nothing serious, just connections that reminded me I was still capable of being close to someone. Eventually, I realized I wasn't scared of women anymore. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was slowly becoming myself again. That's when I started thinking, maybe it was time to let Louise introduce me to someone kind. Someone real. But after that run-in with Rachel, I started having second thoughts. Not about leaving her, that decision was solid. But about how quickly I'd assumed we had nothing left to say. Nothing left in common. I'd always figured she knew exactly how I felt about infidelity. That if she crossed that line, there was no coming back. But listening to her, even in fragments, I realized, maybe I'd been avoiding the whole picture. Still, walking away when I did, it saved me. It gave me space to find clarity, to rebuild. And maybe if I'd seen her right after everything happened, I would have broken. Her tears might have been enough to pull me back into the wreckage. But now, 3 years later, her apology didn't open a door, it closed one. And in doing so, it finally set me free. I might even tell her one day that Marisol isn't my daughter. That Louise and I staged that whole scene. That it was the only way I knew how to make Rachel let go. But I don't owe her that truth. That choice is mine. For now, I've cut the last thread tying me to her. I'm finally walking forward. But not for long. Yesterday, I stood over Rachel's grave with Ross and Emily. Her relatives came. Even Victoria. I cried. Harder than I thought I would. But Victoria? Not a single tear. Rachel had been drinking, spiraling again. She got behind the wheel, and the accident was fatal. Standing there, watching the casket lower into the ground, I couldn't stop thinking, why did Victoria encourage her sister down such a reckless path? Why feed her temptation? The only answer I've found is that it was revenge. Revenge for me and Rachel exposing her own affair, the one that ended her marriage to Mike. Maybe now, with Rachel gone, Victoria feels like things are even. And maybe they are. But what I know for sure is this: I will never love another woman the way I loved Rachel.